ANGLICO is interesting because of the interesting training opportunities, deployment opportunities that are a little bit outside the norm for a Marine JTAC or forward observer or whoever within the unit. So it has been great having those guys on. So I really appreciate you coming on. You were my CO at first ANGLICO back when I checked in 2014 for my deployment there. And just looking forward to talking to you, Brian Russell. Tell us where you're from and why you decided to join the Marine Corps.
Yeah, well, might take us a few minutes to get through. So grew up in Northern Virginia, never want to go back. Place is too crowded, too much going on.
Really?
Yeah, you, as a Marine, you do your Quantico time every so often. Not a bad place, but yeah, just too much hustle and bustle. In my military career, I avoided Pentagon assignment. That's a good news story.
Yeah,
in and of itself. But yeah, so grew up in Northern Virginia, did not have parents in the military, but both of my grandfathers served in World War II. And that was, I think, the initial inclination, Justin, that I should probably serve this country in some form or capacity. The greatest generation we talk about a lot, that came back and really made this country pretty good post World War II.
Yeah.
I said, hey, and I respected both my grandfathers for being men of courage, men of integrity, hardworking, and I just had the sense that okay, probably some of that came out of military service. The sacrifice you go through, the bonds and everything, something came out of that. So hey, probably should sign up. So interesting enough, I was originally inbound to the Navy of all places because one of my grandfathers was a pilot for the Navy in World War II, flying around the South Pacific.
Wow.
Flew a torpedo bomber. Yeah, he shared some pretty funny stories. Evidently, all from him, and I haven't researched this, but he was at the time the junior officer in the squadron. And if you recall, World War II aircraft carriers, this was pre-catapult days, right? So they'd line all those aircraft up, and the guy up front was typically the junior pilot. And so, wow. Hey, good luck, airspeed and lift, and every now and then he would go into the drink, and he'd have this story, getting out. The destroyer would come by with a crane and pick him up, try and recover the aircraft if possible. But just some pretty amazing stories.
It's crazy. I've seen all these old war footage of World War II aircraft going into the ocean, and they recover quite a bit of those guys. And it's just I don't know. It just seemed, well, I mean, obviously they lost quite a bit of those guys, but I don't know. Just going into the ocean at all seems like a really not a good time. And during that time, I don't know. It's just crazy anytime I see a video of an aircraft going into the water and the dude's getting out of it, these old World War II. And to imagine what's going through your mind, and I don't know. That's pretty insane. So they did talk about their time in service with you?
They did, yeah. So my other grandfather served in the Army as an engineer, and he was part of the march up to Berlin in Europe. Some interesting stories there about just dealing with, you and I know this too, that some things never change, just everyday life in the military, the hurry up and wait aspects, the word always changes, those type of things, same thing back in the day, for sure. So yeah, I thought Navy originally, and I came from the Top Gun era, Justin.
Yep.
Growing up, and it was I'm gonna fly for Navy. So was fortunate to get picked up for an ROTC scholarship at North Carolina State University, and thought, okay, I'll go Navy, I'll commission officer and fly. In high school in Northern Virginia, that's where I met my wife. So Kathy and I, we just celebrated our 27th wedding anniversary.
Oh, wow, congrats.
We are high school sweethearts. And so we went to school together in North Carolina. I went to NC State. She's a Tar Heel, Justin. House divided, classic,
hold it against each other, right?
Type of thing. Yeah. So, we joke, and I've even got stories about that, hybrid children, half breeds and all that here in North Carolina. So anyway, we go to school together. Well, Kathy's dad was a Marine. He flew A6s for the Marine Corps. And I joke about it, but there's some truth to this. Part of the reason, I went Marine Corps was to make sure I could marry Bob List's daughter. Kathy didn't want to take any chances, but Bob had a lot of good conversations with me about the difference between the Marine Corps and the Navy. And I picked up on some of that very early in my college education. Marine Corps is very much more people-centric The Navy is much more platform centric.
Mm.
And so at the time, I was very much picking up the vibe that really the only thing the Navy cared about from Brian Russell was my grade point average. Was I going to be technically proficient enough to drive ships, drive submarines, whatever? Where the Marine Corps was, it's all about the Marine. How do we equip that young man or woman for closing with and destroying the enemy? And that takes a lot of investment in people to do that type of thing. And so Bob did a very good job of kind of convincing me the Marine Corps is probably a better option for me, just I guess what he knew of me, but also just the manner in which he would serve is more about just serving with some great people.
Yeah.
And that's part of my Marine Corps story, that a few months on this side of retirement is you miss the good people.
Yeah, for sure. That's I think that's a common denominator for most people that get out and leave the service. It's a weird, I don't know if you're still in the area and you still have a lot of like your military friends around, but for a lot of guys, they leave and they go back to their hometown in like Nebraska or freaking, Texas or something like that. And it's a complete detachment from that military lifestyle, those friends and stuff like that. So I think that really is the hardest part for a lot of people, is the missing your friends and the people and knowing that, like, when you're working with in the Marine Corps, I can't speak to the other branches obviously, but I thought in the Marine Corps, it just felt like people cared. You know what I'm saying? Even people that don't really care, like you couldn't really tell. There was enough people that actually cared, not just about the military and training and stuff, but just like being on base, the whole, you walk by a piece of trash, you pick it up and stuff like that. You don't look like a bag of ass when you go to the store or something like that. Then you get out to the civilian world and you're, and it's like nothing like that. No one cares. It's everyone's about themselves, moving themselves ahead. There's no like team goal, and it's just it's a different vibe. So people go, I know I did. I go, you go through multiple emotions on your way out, where when you first get out, you're messaging. For me, I was messaging people all the time. People are messaging me, and then it slowly kind of drifts off because now I'm that guy that's gone, and then, they're still doing their thing and focusing, and training events are coming up, deployments are coming up, and yeah, it's just it's a weird experience. So I hope the best for you and and everybody else that's getting out. I think the biggest advice I give people, I hope people take advantage of it, is that find something that you care about, and that's because the Marine Corps takes up so much of your life and everything that you really have to replace it with something that you actually care about, and that feels like you're doing something for, I don't know, yourself or whatever it is that you're working on. But
that's a fantastic point. So to answer your question, yeah, we're right outside Camp Lejeune in Sneads Ferry. That's where we decided to plant the flag. But part of that reason is because this is our community. The Marine Corps put us at Camp Lejeune 5 times over those 27 years. And so, the Marine Corps will move you around, but you show up to that new duty station, you're immediately connected with some buds that you've had before. And so we've got that, times 5 across the course of a career here at Camp Lejeune. So yeah, we said, okay, definitely there's some community here we want to link into. But your second point is exactly right too. Find and I just phrase it as purpose. Find purpose in what you're doing, because Marine Corps is purposeful. It is noble. It is a worthy mission. Just like I said, what led me to military service was supporting this nation, defending the nation, serving the nation. That is entirely purposeful, and the Marine Corps certainly, kind of imbues that in you your entire career. So finding something on the outside that is purposeful, or like you said, keeps you plugged into what you care about, is absolutely spot on.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to explain to people that weren't in, and to people that weren't in a job like ours or combat arms, where negative, mistakes can lead to negative consequences very quickly. It's in a lot of cases you're dealing with actual life and death stuff. You mess something up, someone could actually get killed. And then when you get out, there's not that, for the most part, there's not that kind of stress in your daily life. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about catching the side of Camp Pendleton on fire because your machine gun fire, tracer fire or whatever. Yeah. There's not that kind of like immense stress. So for me getting out, it was almost hard to care about stuff, because it was like, oh, what is this this isn't life and death. This doesn't matter. You know, it was just after all the, I don't know, after all the intensity that is the Marine Corps, regular life is kind of boring. You know, so.
Yeah, and I think that's an important part of transition, to find something that still keeps you energized, engaged. And we can certainly talk more about this as it relates to me. Like, I found some mountain biking to do post-military transition. Did that through my whole career. But one of the nice parts about the Marine Corps, and there are many, is they always put me in locations around the country with great mountain bike trails. We were just talking, before we got on, about Southern California, great weather. When we were there serving together first ANGLICO, we were at San Luis Rey, towards the back gate there, literally, Justin, right out of the back of the house. Miles of trails.
Yeah.
To go out all the time.
Yeah. So, you don't even have to go to like named trails or like, ones that are popular. They're just out there. There's just so much land. Yeah. I don't know. I know a few people that do mountain biking, and some of it's pretty extreme. Not anything I would probably get into. I don't know. Are you out there hitting the jumps and everything, or keeping it more mellow?
A little bit of jumping. That is exciting. I think I just have a greater sense of my own mortality at this age.
Yeah.
do a little less of that, more cross country style. But my wife and I debate about this quite a bit. She grew up doing more road cycling than mountain biking. So you can imagine, when we were in Southern California, she was out on the road all the time, doing the triathlon sponsored by the base. I forget what they call, like the Warrior Series out there.
Yeah.
The hardcore series, just
yeah,
really
like that.
Into it. And I told her for years, like, road cycling much more dangerous than mountain biking. And she kind of cocked her head like, what are you talking about? I'm like, hey, absolutes are always dangerous, but I can pretty much say I will never see a car or a truck on a mountain bike trail. And nowadays, the driver behind the wheel is on a phone, paying attention to that, and not you on your bike. And so you're the losing end of a physics equation out on the road if you're going to get hit by a vehicle.
Yeah,
not on a mountain bike. I control all the dynamics, so to speak. I don't like that hill. I'm going to slow down, maybe even get off the bike. Not a problem.
Yeah, for sure.
The trees ain't jumping out at me. on a mountain bike trail.
There's some bikers out here that go down some roads. I'm like, man, this is a dangerous road to be going down. What really freaks me out is when I go up to like Palomar Mountain or something like that, and you come around a blind corner and there's a bike right there going, 2 miles an hour. This dude's pumping as hard as he can to try to get up that incline. That's I don't know. I always got annoyed by the bikers, I'll be honest, especially on base when I'd be heading out to ANGLICO and there'd be like a huge pack of like 100 people. And I'm like, oh my God, no way. Like, you can't go around them at all. I get why people do it, but man, Southern California is so dense with people and cars and stuff. It is definitely a risk, kind of like riding a motorcycle out here. A lot of places it's just a carefree activity, but out here you got to be on your, you got to be paying attention or it could end pretty badly.
Yeah, you absolutely do. And I'm a big fan of share the road, obviously. But again, if I don't have to put myself in that kind of risky situation, I'll just stick to the mountain bike trail and still get a great workout and
for sure
enjoy the outdoors.
So after you got done with school and stuff, obviously, you said you were talking about becoming a pilot or wanted to become a pilot. Did they have the pilot contracts guaranteed at the time, or were you like everyone? A lot of people that go to OCS and then TBS, you don't know what your job's going to be, and until the end when you've completed and your class ranking and stuff has all been figured out.
So they absolutely had the air contracts available. Unfortunately, my eyes went to crap right as I was going into college, and there was still that requirement for 20/20 vision to be a pilot. And so I was like, doesn't look like that's gonna work out for me. Yeah. So like a lot of Marine officers do without that contract, aviation law was another kind of guarantee. And I think we're doing cyber contracts now.
Oh, wow.
For that occupational field. Yeah. Just if you can imagine, just trying to lock in a young guy or gal that's got that computer science degree, maybe some experience in industry, high demand, low density skill set. You want to lock that in. So the Marine Corps went on that road. Anyway, like the majority of Marine officers, you show up to the basic school and you get assigned your MOS basically on how you rank in the basic school. I don't know if anyone's ever explained that.
The top, middle, and bottom thirds.
Yeah, they do the quality spread. So they break your class into thirds, and then the first guy in the first third gets his, first choice, so to speak. Then they go to the first guy or gal in the second third, then the first guy in the third. And they do the kind of selection that way, just to make sure they spread that quote unquote quality across all the MOSs is how it works out.
I understand the concept, and I understand why I understand why they do it. And obviously they've been pretty successful with creating Marine officers that are really good at what they do. At a time though, when more like job fields are becoming specialized, and like cyber is a perfect example. Like that's a very specific, you're not going to throw some random person, or you shouldn't probably throw some random person into a cyber job and expect them to excel. Do you think it would be better for officers to also have the same kind of opportunity? Like when you enlist as an enlisted guy, you can do a ground contract, you can do an infantry contract where you may not be able to pick what infantry job you're getting, but you're getting that field. Do you think it'd be better for officers to be able to choose their field, or more so, as we become more specialized?
So I think broadly, per our conversation about transition and finding something you like to do, something you're passionate about, I'm a big fan of put people in places where they really like doing those things. I think there's a benefit to that. With the current selection process, there is some flexibility. So everyone puts in their choice, and this is Marine Corps, Justin, right? Needs of the Marine Corps will outweigh all, but you get your requests, and then the board of officers there at the base school takes a look. And if, said named officer gets selected because of the draw for, say, this could be the case, like gets selected for infantry, but the officer put supply as their MOS. And guess what? He just came from Amazon Logistics Services before he or she went to college. There's a little bit of flexibility to go, okay, in this case, we'll slate towards an MOS where it makes some sense to do. So I think there is some flexibility in the system to do that. I think it does speak to, if you've been following the talent management discussion in the Marine Corps, and there's a lot of debate on General Berger in the public sphere about force design and everything he's doing to either revolutionize the Marine Corps or destroy it, right? That's the two sides of the debate. Talent management is going to be tough because at the end of the day, there are requirements. Like I said, like what brought us to First Anglico when we met each other, a billet on the table organization said, I need this type model series to go there. But if, Brian Russell's like, Anglico, oh, that's a funny story too. Let me tell that one, by the way. But just for example, like, no, I'm Anglico, what's that? Which a lot of people ask, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, what's that? Marine Corps doesn't have a lot of flexibility to send me somewhere else. Like I was that one guy that was kind of the right fit at the time. But anyway, the funny story behind that, a lot of the listeners here being Anglicans will know the history, but you remember Anglico went away in 1999.
Yeah, and became the MLE.
Came in this MLE weird thing, Marine Corps doing whatever form of downsizing, and like, we'll never need that again. And sure enough, in 2003, oh crap, we're going, hey, who's going to coordinate fires with the Brits? Okay, bring that capability back. Anyway, so when I'm a lieutenant, I'm due for my next assignment in 1999, and I take a look at this Anglico thing. I'm like, oh, that sounds awesome, right? That's missions, cool. Send me there. So my battalion XO, who's mentoring me, is like, don't go there. Your career will be over.
I've heard multiple artillery officers say that. That's crazy.
So I think contextually, well, there's two. Let me just, the artillery community writ large, I'll speak at least for officers, has always viewed Anglico with a little bit of suspicion and maybe jealousy, right? Just we're off the beaten path, great, fantastic mission. Marines have great time doing that, but it's not the gun, it's not the tube, it's not the rocket. Again, there's a little bit of platform centricity in the artillery community, and the ability to manage the weapon system holds primacy over the fire support side of our business. You have probably seen that in your career, right? Fire support, even inside the battalion, right? Fire supporters, they're off in that building doing their thing. And
you're the bastard child.
Consolidation, break them back out. We've gone that way about 500,000 times in our community. So there's a broader contextual of Anglico. The second was in 1999, the writing wasn't all on the wall that they were going away. And I called it, I was a 10th Marines guy, 1st Battalion, 10th Marines as a lieutenant. I called it the N Street Shuffle, because 2nd Anglico, their CP was at the top of N Street where 10th Marine Regiment was.
Oh, okay.
And at least, again, on the officer side, because the writing was on the wall, 10th Marines was not sending their best and brightest officers to 2nd Anglico. So it was a place where kind of the outcasts were going, and not a career enhancing move at the time. But yeah, think about my first Anglico assignment, Justin, 1st Anglico commander.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, so I got selected. I'm like, that's funny. I was told my career would go nowhere, and here I am. I get to command this wonderful organization.
It's interesting though that there's like that. I know exactly what you're talking about. There are the fire supporters are the bastard children of the artillery world, of the infantry world. That's why I always tell people, I'm like, in artillery, you're usually off on your own doing, your office is separate from everyone. I mean, when I was at 210, our office wasn't even connected to the battalion building. So we didn't even see all the leadership and stuff on a regular basis unless there was like a formation or something like that. And then when you go over, and then when you want to get schools and stuff like that, they're like, yeah, it'd be cool to send you to a school, but we got to buy artillery rounds or whatever. And we got, Bragg coming up or something like that. And there's no time for schools. And then when you get over the infantry, they're like, we're not going to spend money on you. You're an attachment. We're not going to send you to schools because why would I spend money on an attachment? And it's a weird dynamic for sure. But yeah, I've had multiple artillery officers say kind of the same thing, that they're like, ANGLICO is not artillery. So if you want to be an artillery officer and move up in the artillery officer world, then ANGLICO is not the best spot for it. But, whatever. I'm glad, other people are coming out and saying, I didn't ruin my career. I didn't mess up my career. Because that would be unfortunate for people to like assume that something like that would be detrimental for them. When really, I think, I don't know, you get such it's such a good experience just integrating with other Marine Corps units, the opportunities you get to work with other Marine Corps units, foreign units, Army units, Air Force guy. It's just the training that you do, the joint training that you do, and the opportunities that are there are just amazing. And what's crazy is that you build these relationships, and you saw it, when the 148 battery guys would come over. Those guys were the same guys. They knew some of the senior ANGLICO, like the senior 148 battery guys knew the senior ANGLICO guys from their deployments to like the Gulf War and stuff. These were dudes that had been doing joint training exercises together for years and then deployed together. And then it's like it's a weird working relationship where you actually know people consistently overseas,
A weird working relationship, but a vital one. So just think about the current strategic context our nation is working within, and basically what all of our national security leaders have said, our strengths relative to our, call them adversaries or competitors, China, Russia, is allies and partners. Mm-hmm. Like when we go to war, like people come with us and we work together. And because of the nature of our business, Justin, the military, it's based on inherent trust, right? You can't have mission tactics, mission command, just give the Marine task and purpose and let him go figure things out, when the situation changes, and it will, if there's not that inherent trust and understanding of what's going on and who's to my right and left. And if that's an ally or partner, if you already have that relationship and trust, that's a combat multiplier. Right 100%. There. And so yeah, that is the unique nature of ANGLICO. And the other thing between ANGLICO and the artillery community, it's like every 3 to 4 years, there's this, hey, let's bring ANGLICO over to the division. Yeah. Let's fold it into the regiment. It boom, boom, boom. And sure enough, so there I am, the waning part of my career. I get the opportunity to command 2nd Meth Information Group at Camp Lejeune. 2nd ANGLICO is a member of Meth Information Group. And a lot of people are like, why is that? Well, what is the inherent nature of ANGLICO? The inherent nature of ANGLICO is extending MAGTF capabilities to allies and partners so we can do things better together. And traditionally that has been artillery, naval gunfire, aviation, traditionally. That doesn't mean you can't extend any other capability as we consider cyber, space, psychological operations, electronic warfare out of the radio battalion. No reason that can't be task organized and also extend and scale your combat power across allies and partners. And so that's why ANGLICOs reside in the MEF information group at the MEF level. And so when I step into 2 MIG, again, it came back up like, oh, we're going to move the ANGLICOs over division. I briefed my 3-star CG at the time. He goes, what? I am not giving up my L in ANGLICO liaison to do a lot of amazing things with allies and partners. Ain't no way. Yeah. And so we got that overturned.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point, how capabilities are kind of shifting, and you should bring in new capabilities and stuff like that. Is the I guess the traditional forward observer from the global war on terror, is that still a thing, or is it shifting into more cyber stuff? Is it, because I remember being at ANGLICO and even with artillery, and occasionally a guy would get pulled, an 0861 would get pulled to go do cyber command. They would be like digital fires is what they would call it, or something like that. Is that becoming more and more part of their job now?
I think it will be, because it has to be. It's just the world and the operating environment we live in. And back to the fire support side of the things we did is I can make a target not do what it's supposed to by putting a JDAM into it, or I can hack into it and turn off the system, and then it's combat ineffective. So there's a lot of different ways to get after targets nowadays, because holy crap, it seems like everything's connected to the internet. So there's certainly a defensive aspect of that, and we need to be careful of our own stuff.
For sure.
But man, everyone else is using it, so why don't we use that as an opportunity to quote unquote hack into it? And I'll tell you, think about that. I love ANGLICO history. It's so informative, and really why it was so powerful. And even the development of close air support doctrine in our own service, right? We kind of led the charge. Well, what really prompted that? What made that thing happen? It was taking those pilots with experience in the air domain and bringing them down to the ground unit level and literally embedding them into the unit. And think about that evolution, Justin, right? We evolved from needing the air domain guy on the ground with us to just training our own Marines ground guys to do the aviation coordination aspect. I think we're in a similar case nowadays, where we'll probably have to bring some cyber domain expertise and get them embedded and down to, here's what's available, here's how you coordinate it. And then it will evolve as the Marine Corps and any of the services get more cyber capability inherent to their organization. They'll just be doing it themselves. So I don't need to, hey, you, this is me, and the U is US Cyber Command right now. Like, way back national, do you have it to, hey, there's something inside the formation to just shut it down non-kinetically, vice kinetically. And I want both.
Yeah.
I want both options. More ways to win, always good.
Yeah, for sure. Does it become an issue of, or is there any talks of it becoming an issue of maybe task overload? Because there's already a lot of stuff for the normal 0861 to learn, to pick up between your basic like forward observer stuff, target location, self-location, and then when you start moving up, running in a fade TIDS, understanding coordination of different fire assets and stuff like that. Does adding another thing on top of that become like, oh man, I saw, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I saw this while I was at 0861. If you became really good at the FATIDs, then the odds were you probably weren't on the hill very much, because you became like the COC guy. And then that kind of becomes a split, right, within the MOS, where you got guys that are really good at one thing and guys that are really good at something else, but they're both expected to do both jobs, and but it's not realistic. Is adding these other tasks or whatever it is on top of that, the cyber requirements, is there a fear of that becoming even more of a task overload?
I think that will be a challenge, and it will have to be balanced. They'll be the first to admit that. And you can see the progression in some of our occupational fields in the Marine Corps, where, being an artillery officer, and you might have faced this as well, is whatever the effect was, is always lumped on the artillery fire support coordinator guy. Kinetic, non-kinetic, just you do all of that stuff. Well, now we have occupational fields in the Marine Corps that do those things. Influence officers and influence Marines, space officers, space Marines, cyber officers, cyber Marines. So I think we've expanded some of the task load, and it might not have to be the 0861 that does everything, but knows who to talk to and how to coordinate, because we do have that expertise somewhere around him or her on the battlefield.
Yeah, my artillery officer, Captain Scholl, in 2011, when we were in Marja with 3-6, he got pulled to go be the IO guy. So I ended up taking over the fire section without him while he went to do IO. I felt really bad for him. I was like, oh, that sucks, man. Like, I know that's not why you joined. I know that's why you didn't become an artillery officer, to go make, rehab messages, the radio in a box messages. But yeah, such is life. As a commanding officer of 1st ANGLICO, for those that don't know, small unit, like 160 people or so, roughly. And most of the time they didn't deploy as a unit. I know they have deployed as an entire unit before. Did they deploy as an entire unit while you were there, or was it always just teams rotating out?
No. I came in right after the last rotation. So I replaced Brian Brueggemann, who took 1st ANGLICO in its entirety to Afghanistan. That's the last full ANGLICO deployment. And then you recall from there, it broke down into brigade platoons, down to assaults, and we kind of ramped that down. So I was very much in a period of transition there at 1st ANGLICO as we were ramping down from our Afghanistan involvement into what was coming next, other requirements. at the time.
What was the challenge for you as a commanding officer where your unit doesn't deploy as one whole unit? You have guys all over the world doing different rotations with different people.
I think two come to mind. I'll call it organizational culture and I'll call it mission culture. The first, organization culture, there's this being downrange, there's no greater bond than the unit going crucible of combat, figuring some things out. And so now I've inherited an organization that just portions are going to go do that thing. How do you keep the whole unit together? And that's important in ANGLICO. It was still on the bulkheads while I was there from a former commanding officer, Mike Grice, who's one of my mentors. Mike was actually my gunnery instructor at Fort Sill when I was a lieutenant.
Nice.
Wicked smart gunnery, but just a phenomenal officer, really a fantastic commander for ANGLICO. But his phrase that he still saw on the bulkheads was, everybody fights.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Everybody fights. And you know why that is. If the 0861 takes the bullet to the head, the radio operator needs to be able to get on and do the call for fire, do the 9 line or whoever, right? And it doesn't matter who you are in ANGLICO, motor T, driver, whatever, you need to be able to perform. And so you might recall, we brought back the ANGLICO basic course.
Yep.
While I was there. It doesn't matter who you are. You're coming to ANGLICO, you're going to get a basic skills training package. So you basically know what the unit mission is and you're fairly comfortable being deployed in that type of environment. So I think that's one, Justin, just trying to maintain some organizational culture. The other challenge that I thought was just the mission culture. And it was a shift from one kind of operation, counterinsurgency, in one dynamic of how you coordinate fires within that, and then preparing for, call it a bigger fight or a different fight. I had to remind my peers sometimes that they would be curious. You mentioned ANGLICO, 160 Marines, maybe on a good day. Why is Lieutenant Colonel in charge of a company, right? It's Air Naval Gunfire Liaison Company. Mm-hmm. Well, doctrinally, our entire organization is designed to splice into an allied division.
Yep.
That's why we're structured that way. So brigade platoons, right? Plug into the Army brigade, salts, battalion, down to FIC company, all up and down an allied or even U.S. Army division. Well, the Lieutenant Colonel, commander, awesome, but I become assistant fire support coordinator for the division commander at that point. That's why it's a lieutenant colonel. Not that I need much help, leading 160 Marines.
Yeah.
You recall a lot of officers in that ANGLICO.
Oh yeah, 100%.
A lot of majors, a lot of captains, which had good aspects to it, right? We had, I forget the exact ratio, but it was like 1 to 3 or 4, one captain for every 3 and 4 enlisted Marines, which again, if you're enlisted Marine, sometimes whoa, okay, enough attention, boss. But you could admit some fair leadership and mentorship from.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think it actually was I think it's a good environment, honestly, for junior Marines to be around, because as an enlisted guy grows through the ranks, he is supposed to at some point become the advisor, to the officer. And that means you got to be okay with saying something like, hey, that's not a good idea, or this or that. And a lot of guys don't have interactions with officers a lot throughout their career. So when it comes to that point where they're in that position, they may be a little timid. I think, like ANGLICO, when you have a lot of officers like that, it makes guys understand that these are just normal guys too, and for the most part, you can give them your opinion and they'll, I thought at ANGLICO was really good about, I don't know, you could give your opinion and there wasn't like a lot of pushback, or there wasn't shut up, Staff Sergeant, or anything like that. It was like, hey, if you got a good idea, bring it up. I'd like to hear it, because maybe we're not seeing the best way to do this that, you've come up with. So I don't know. I thought it was a really good environment.
I think it works both ways, Justin. I think it opens a lot of officers' eyes to the absolute brilliance, creativity, and capability of the junior enlisted Marine when you're that close, right? In some of your hierarchical structures, you deal with the staff sergeant, maybe a sergeant, and you don't really interact with the Lance Corporal. Mm-hmm. But when you have Lance Corporal Bolanos briefing the battalion fire support plan at National Training Center to the U.S. Army Fire Support Officer Captain, and that captain calls you, the commanding officer, is like, where do you make these Lance Corporals? I'm like, it's Marine Corps. We expect our Marines to perform and step up and do things like that. Mm-hmm. And you really get to see it. And it's one of my major takeaways, certainly from throughout my career, but particularly Anglico. I say Marines are hackers by nature. And I don't mean that in the cyber context per se. That's what most people think. But I just mean there's a problem in front of you. You don't necessarily have the tools to solve that problem immediately, but Marines are going to figure out.
Yeah.
Marines are going to solve that problem. They're going to get pretty darn creative
Yeah.
with how to solve that problem. And that's what you see in Anglico, just that kind of environment to come up with things pretty creatively.
Yeah.
Because it is. It's you and 3 Marines out there with the allies.
And even when you're back in the rear, the opportunity to talk to someone that's an expert on like a certain CAS platform is there, because throughout the unit, there's so many pilots and stuff that are there from different platforms, from F-18s to C-130s. You know, if you have a question about something, you can almost find someone within the unit that you can just go directly ask that question to and get an answer. And I think it also, having all those different people from different backgrounds come together in a unit like Anglico, it really fosters an academic level discussion about a lot of the tasks that we do, you know, to like, hey, what are we considering here, you know, and you, because you have the subject matter experts from, like I said, like different platforms. You got ARTI guys that have been, you know, battery commanders or whatever. You got F-18 guys that are WTIs, you know, they're the weapons and tactics instructors. And I don't know, it's just a lot of experience, a lot of good background. I completely get when enlisted guys get up to their first 4 years. If they were at Anglico first and they come up to re-enlistment, some of them decide to just get out because they think it's not going to be any better, you know, than what they had there. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think there's obviously a lot of opportunities out there in the military to do other stuff, but it is a unique experience for sure.
There is, and I do think that's a real challenge for some of our first tour Anglico Marines that go back to, you know, the other parts of the Marine Corps. But I always tried to tell them, take it with you.
Yeah.
To take some of that special we have here and just try and make that where you're going and spread that type of mentality elsewhere. But the other thing, you know, the mission culture aspect, I said, you know, here we're doing counterinsurgency and we still have some teams that have to go do that, but I've got to prepare for that next big fight. So I think the 2 bigger exercise training opportunities while I was a commanding officer took a portion of the headquarters of Marines down to Australia in my first year for exercise Aqua Terra, and essentially the 1st Australian Army Division. They serve as a joint task force headquarters for Australia. They're one if they have to deploy significant forces downrange, and day on, stay on. They have one Australian Army major as their fire section.
Oh wow!
And so in the, you know, genesis of the exercise, and they basically asked the Marine Corps, hey, could you help, you know, flesh out our fire section for this major exercise? And it, you know, it's like, if only there was an organization designed to splice into an allied division. Anglico. So yeah, I took a group of Marines down there, spent a couple weeks in Australia doing that exercise. Again, fighting a higher level fight and doing higher level fire support coordination. And then we did rinse and repeat and did the same thing up in Canada the next year.
Oh, yeah.
For one of their major exercises. They would put their battle groups through a rotation, almost like their version of 29 Palms, bring the battle group in, train them up, fight, high end. And so that gave a couple things, again, another opportunity to do it at a higher level, but yeah, some cold weather environment and training.
Yeah, I think those guys were going to that like right after we got home from deployment, and they came back and were like, man, it was cold. Guys were like, yeah, I thought we were going to go up and, you know, do some exercises, come back, you know, whatever. Like it would be going out and coming back and stuff. And I think Farrell was saying, he's like, yeah, I got my, my pack and got dropped off somewhere, and I didn't see anyone for, you know, any of the other Marines for like 20 days or whatever, because we're out in a foxhole dodging tanks. He's like, they got tanks out here rolling around. He's like, you're trying not to freeze to death. He's like, it was pretty an interesting time for sure. But
it was, and it was part of that mission shift, right? We're used to Afghanistan, FOB, we go out, do the thing, come back. Pretty sure I'm going to eat every day. Pretty sure, well, you need to think through battery resupply, you know, when you're out in far away. You really need to think those things through. So it was good training. The other aspect, let me tie this back into the relationships we talked about, you know, this nature of Anglico. I went to Army Command and Staff College as a major in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. So I always joke with people, I spent a year in Leavenworth, but it was for school, not the prison. But one of my concerns about going to Army PME was I just wouldn't establish the relationships like I did in some of my Marine Corps schools, because you always run into those Marines again, and that's the value of resident PME for me, is just you're going to meet people there from across the Marine Corps, and sure enough, you're going to be downrange. You're able to pick up the phone and talk to that person. You have a relationship with them and get some things done. Well, same thing here. I sat down in my seminar group first week, and sitting next to me is Joe Pospolita, Canadian artillery officer. I'm like, man, I'll never see Joe again in my life. Well, you want to guess who I met in Kandahar on my very first deployment after Command and Staff College?
Nice.
Joe Pospolita, because the Canadians own the provincial reconstruction team in Kandahar, and he was the deputy for that PRT rotation. So literally, I meet him at the Tim Hortons coffee shop on the boardwalk in Kandahar. That was the Canadian coffee shop there.
That's
but
right.
guess who? Just guess who the operations officer of the Canadian Training Center was when we went to do that exercise?
What's that?
Joe Pospolita.
Nice.
You want to know
awesome.
how easy it was to get stuff done? Because I knew Joe. Hey, Joe, I'd like to get my Marines over here. Hey, Joe, I'd like to. Yeah, we're going to bring these F-18s a little bit differently this time. And you've got your officer up there like explaining that. He's like, okay.
Yeah. That's interesting. It's such a small. We take for granted how small the military is, and how you can run into these people throughout your career and stuff like that. That's so, especially someone from Canada. That's pretty awesome that you ran into him on 2 different occasions.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great.
Joe's a good human being, so he helped us out a lot. But I think the other thing, just back to the ANGLICO culture thing, was the thing I learned. You learn a ton as a commander, obviously, was command climate and how to message. What's important to you. And I don't know if you were in that command climate survey town hall I hosted.
I don't think so. I may have been deployed.
Yeah, it was probably late 14, early 15. It was one of the last ones I did. But basically, like, a ton of sentiments that the CO, me, didn't care about close air support, didn't care about JTAC training. And I'm like, what's going on there? And I think it was based on what I told you. Hey, let's go do some different things, higher level and the like. And I had to bring everyone in the room and go, hey, it's not that I don't care about it. It's I don't have to worry about it. And I basically called everyone up by name. I said, hey, Two-Face, stand up. So Two-Face, Major Stevens was my operations officer, Aviator. Hey, Tommy Z, stand up. Tom Dunzig, if you remember.
Yeah, 65.
Tom Dunzig, yeah. Guess who I went to NC State with and graduated in 1995? Tom Dunzig.
No way.
Yeah, he was my air officer. Do you think I had to worry about Tommy Z taking care of business and training the command for?
Yeah.
Hey, Gunny Smith, stand up, WTI. Hey, Colin Yukon, stand up, WTI. I got no lack of experience.
Yeah.
In this command.
I thought, I'll tell you,
don't have to focus on it.
Having been assault chief while you were there, really, what I really appreciated was the flexibility that the teams were given to do their own training. It was like, what do we want to do? I remember sitting with Captain Watt going, what ranges do we want to schedule? We would schedule everything, or we would plan out everything and then just brief it up, obviously, at the training meetings and stuff, but never obviously, we weren't just doing crazy training out of left field, some weird we're going to go do driver, training or something, driving vehicles around doing circles and stuff. I don't know. I just thought I really appreciated the flexibility we were given to design our own training programs, come up with how we wanted to do it. I actually probably learned more about coming up with training at ANGLICO than I did anywhere else, because it was I didn't know before that you could it was all about asking. You just have to ask. A lot of times, people are yeah, that range is open, or that kind of training. Yeah, that makes sense. If you can justify the training that you want to do, then why not? Where again, I came from 210, there wasn't a lot of outside the box training going on. It was very much you already have enough field ops. I think when I was there, we had a field op every month, and then we had 2 brags a year, going to Fort Bragg twice a year, which is each a month-long field exercise. Then on top of that, sometimes you'd get pulled to go do an EMV to support an EMV. So outside the box training wasn't necessarily happen. The ANGLICO teams didn't have all those kind of responsibilities to go work with all these units. And I don't know. I just really enjoyed the ability to kind of plan our own training and stuff like that, make it happen. Our officers would contact squadrons and get flights for time on stations, or make liaison. I remember multiple times going out to Yuma just to do dry casts with Harriers on Yuma, just to help build and foster that relationship So when we wanted, those guys for a TCP event, TCP shoot or something like that, it was an easy call. Be like, hey, are you guys available? So I would disagree. I don't know. I didn't see that. I got way more close air support training there than I did at 10th Marines. When I first became a JTAC, I've talked about it multiple times on the show. I went to TCP school, got done. And for those that don't know, you go to TCP school, you get certified as a JTAC, and then you come back to your unit, and then that's where you get designated. You go through a bunch of different steps. You got to do live controls at day, night, all that stuff. And then you're supposed to get designated, which means that you can go and control aircraft on your own. You don't have to have somebody supervising you when you're dropping bombs. And my first deployment, as a JTAC in 2013, I didn't see a live bomb drop until I got to Afghanistan. I did TCP school on the East Coast, which there's really no live ordnance there because of all the range restrictions and stuff like that. I deployed as an advisor, so there was no JTAC specific training for advisor teams. And then I got to Afghanistan, and then it was like, oh, there's the live bomb actually hitting. That's what it looks like. So I don't know. I disagree. I mean, I got to ANGLICO and we were going out to San Clemente Island. We were going different parts of Pendleton. I thought we were doing a lot of close air support training, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's great to hear it. I think I mentioned it from a leadership lesson perspective is your actions do speak louder than word. Like where I was devoting my time was not necessarily, the classic debate. I asked a lot of mentors about this. Should I get certified as a JTAC? There was a long history of all ANGLICO commanders being certified as a JTAC. And I talked to a couple who said, no, you don't really need to. That's not where you need to be spending your time.
Yeah.
And you're going to take, calls from someone else or aircraft and all that. So really what I spent most of my time doing just in terms of supporting the aviation training was really spending time with the staff to justify all that training you talked about, the bottom up, and here's what we're doing, linking it to our TNR. Mm-hmm. So I could link it to the budget. And so the next year when budget cuts came, I could say, nope, I need to go to Mountain Home, Idaho, because that's where the aviation is to sustain my readiness. So I need this much in money to support the TAD expense. That's where but the Marines don't see that, right? They just say, hey, the CO's not out here on the hill with me, dropping bombs with me, so he doesn't care about air support. No, not necessarily. Like I said, I just have plenty of experts that are able to do that inside the command. Don't need to spend my time doing that. I need to posture the command for future success. Because we're in a transition. Didn't quite know what was coming next. I just knew one of the inherent pieces of ANGLICO is its aviation capability. So we better protect that for future years.
Yeah, I know. It was, again, like I really enjoyed my time there, and I rolled right into a deployment. I mean, I showed up and I checked in on a Friday, then checked out, and then checked into the MU on Monday, and then started into a MU workup. So there was a lot of that in there too. But really good, really good time. When you were at the MiG and you had 2nd ANGLICO under you, traditionally back in the day, 2nd ANGLICO was a support for like the 82nd Airborne, I believe is what it was, in case they ever got called up. Is that still something that they do? Or how is the integration with the 2nd ANGLICO and the Army? Because that used to be a pretty solid relationship.
Less than it was historically, it was my sense, and mainly because our MEF had very much a focus on USCYBERCOM. And so 2nd ANGLICO was very much NATO allies and partners focused, and spent most of their times either overseas with them or hosting them locally in Camp Lejeune, the big Burmese chase exercise, which there's probably something about stealing it from 1st ANGLICO in there somewhere, because we ran a Burmese chase when I was in 1st ANGLICO, 148 matter. So I show up the 2 MiG, and 2nd ANGLICO's briefing me and like, yeah, we're doing Burmese chase this summer. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, isn't that on the West Coast? Oh no, 148 comes here now to do
oh wow
training. Yeah, but Burmese chase had evolved into, I think the last one I did with 2 MiG, golly, I think it was something like 20 allied nations were participating in some form or fashion. Nice. It might have been one dude, but they had a good number of European allies coming to participate in Burmese chase. So it was much more ally and partner focus when I was there than 82nd Airborne.
Yeah. When you left ANGLICO, you went over to Cyber Command, correct?
I did by way of school. I was inbound, like a lot of post command lieutenant colonels are. They go to a war college after their command tour. Same with me. Selected to go to National War College. But this is like March of 2015. So I'm a few months from PCS and packing up the house, getting out to school. I was going to National War College in Washington, D.C. The monitor literally emails all 16 Marine officers going to that school. Hey, guess what? There's a new cyber war college at National Defense University, and one of you chortleheads is going to go, right? It was like the call for volunteers. Like one of you guys is going to do this. So I'm like, cyber. And I had been thinking about that, Justin, actually based on First ANGLICO. ANW2 waveform, which, who knows if any of your listeners remember that or know what that is, but, IP, Internet Protocol based radio waveform amongst our radios. We had, whether we realize it or not, tactical internet inside First ANGLICO.
Yeah.
Kill switch applications on tablets connected to the internet. Like, we weren't doing cyberspace operations, but we were in the domain. Whether, like I said, whether we realized or not, or did something with it or not, is a question. But I'm like, oh, cyber, that sounds kind of interesting. So I picked up the phone to a very good friend of mine, Hank Brown. I served with him out in 112. I was his 3 Alpha when he was the 3 out there on my captain's tour. He was the original chief of fires at US Cyber Command and then retired out of there. So I call him like, hey, what do you think? He goes, hang up the phone. I don't know if you've looked around, but the cyber thing is a bit of a growth industry. So yeah. you may want to go check that out. So sure enough, put my hand in the air and they selected me. And so I went to the inaugural resident program of the College of Information and Cyberspace at National Defense University to think about cyber strategy for a year. I'm like, oh, okay. That sounds good. And yeah, that led to a set of orders to US Cyber Command. I mentioned earlier, like avoiding the Pentagon. The other, little secret about Marine Corps officer war college, the Marine Corps, you can imagine, a little bit cheap sometimes, don't like spending money on a ton of things. So if you're going to a war college in the National Capital Region and you have not done a joint tour yet as an officer, you are going to the Pentagon. Like no PCS costs involved, just head on over to the Pentagon. I'm like, hey, if I do the cyber thing, I'll get a set of orders to Fort Meade, and sure enough, it worked out. I avoided the Pentagon.
Before we talk about cyber, why do you want to avoid the Pentagon? Is it just so top heavy,
it's a slog? Yeah, so top heavy, full of general officers, staff work. Like no officer really comes in to do staff work, right? Like commander and out in the field, and that is probably the furthest away you can get from that type of thing as you possibly can. Like I said, I already mentioned growing up in Northern Virginia, never want to go back. Traffic is miserable, just too much hustle and bustle. So yeah, avoiding Pentagon duty, I can say I avoided it my entire career. Not that I didn't do headquarters Marine Corps work. We could talk about this too, but Quantico, headquarters Marine Corps, and I was the company grade artillery monitor for a couple of years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the monitor.
You're the guy. You became what you you become the enemy at some point, I guess. No,
that's right.
I imagine
probably why a lot of artillery officers know me for good or for bad. Anyway, there's some name recognition with Russell.
I imagine that's a tough gig because monitors always get a bad rap no matter what, because people are going to get orders they don't want. So it's like, oh, they screwed me. But it's also got to be a tough call when that you're like making life decisions for people. And sometimes it may not be what they want, but it may be best for them. What was that like?
It was probably one of my most professionally rewarding assignments in the Marine Corps from a couple of different perspectives. I mentioned staff duty. No officer really likes coming in doing staff work, and particularly headquarters Marine Corps. A lot of officers will do an assignment headquarters Marine Corps, and they will work on something, and never see like the tangible results of their actions. You work on strategic plans, you work on policy, and you never really see like, yeah, I made something happen. Well, as a monitor, you're issuing orders all year, and you're making things happen. I agree with you. Not a lot of those orders are where people want to go, but most of the times they are. I'd say 95% of the officers in my population were pretty happy with the assignment they eventually got. And so you're making things happen. And you're right. It's we talk a lot about this talent management and retaining, recruiting the Marine, retaining his or her family. Those are life decisions you're making with orders. Yeah. Hey, spouse has a job, kid about to graduate high school, can I stay, impactful decisions. But I'd say 90+% was some pretty good things for folks. And so very rewarding. from that perspective. And then just you see how the Marine Corps works. You see behind the curtain a little bit and go, okay, this is how this institution really runs. And for those 5% or so, you're just never going to make happy. One, you'll never make them happy with anything. Hey, I want a billet in Europe. I don't have any this year. There's like, here's my list. Like, there's no requirement to, oh, you can make it happen. No, I'm sorry, I can't. And so sometimes you'll never make people happy. But even if you know, and you're looking at this thing they call the slate, billets, and people and all that, the life truth, bad news never gets better with time.
Yeah.
Be open and honest with people as early as you can. Just say, hey, brother, I'm not seeing it this year. I will do everything I can, but by March, I need to get some orders out. One, for you and your family, but two, so that command knows who they're getting. So I got to engage with, most of the artillery officer population across the Marine Corps.
That's awesome.
Great. That was pretty good. That was a pretty good tour. You learn a lot.
Yeah, that's good for networking too, right? What kind of advice would you give to like a Marine officer that's coming up on their first maybe orders or whatever, their PCSs? They know a PCS is coming. When should they contact the monitor, or what kind of advice would you give them from having been on the other side of that phone call?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I would say be as open and honest with your desires as possible, even though there's that perception out there, the monitor will jam me with this. If I tell him whatever, aspect of my desire is, he'll find that billet and immediately issue me orders. But arming the monitor with as much information as possible is actually best for you. I won't say much about like when to contact the monitor and how to do it, particularly as a first tour officer. I do know we still probably live in an environment where the battalion executive officer has a lot of sway on first officer engagement. And sometimes the XO is a bit of a filter, but it's all with the mind of like, I got mentorship to that young officer. So that young man or woman doesn't sign up for someone with a monitor that isn't really good for him or her. So that might be something you do want to check with your chain of command about reaching out to the monitor for the first time to make sure, one, they get a vote too. Like when you're able to depart the command, you want to tell them, I'm ready to go. Like, whoa, we signed you up for that next deployment. You're not going anywhere. That would be bad, I think. But then just if we're talking first tour officers, I would say writ large, don't worry about where the next assignment is. Just bloom where you're planning to do the best job you can in that assignment. There's no like 1 second tour that's going to make or break your career. What will make or break your career is if you go to that assignment, you suck at it. That will break your career. Yeah. So it doesn't. You got a lot of flexibility. Stay in the MOS. Go to ANGLICO. Go to recruit training battalion. Be a series commander down there. Go back to Fort Sill. Be a gunnery instructor. Don't worry about that. Just do the best you can wherever you go. I would say this is particularly important as you grow in the ranks, is your professional reputation will precede you. Yeah. It will precede you everywhere you go.
100%.
The monitor or inside the board or whatever the case may be, your reputation will precede you. So just be someone that's really does a good job, cares. You mentioned that. Find something you care about. Yeah, do that. And don't worry about the particular assignment.
Yeah, the 08 community is a small community, and the officer corps is even smaller. So it's like, I knew like if we got a new scout or we had a JTAC or whatever, if we didn't know about them and we wanted to find out, it was like 1 phone call away. A lot of times you knew the person or knew about them already just because of how small a community is. But you can find out about somebody pretty easily. And I remember some fires chiefs made it a point to call, like if a guy was PCSing, to call the other fires chief that they're going to and just giving them a kind of a roundup, a little... Just here's what you're getting kind of deal, which is good and bad. You don't want to set any kind of negative expectations. Someone shows up and you think they're going to be a shitbag or something like that, and they turn out to be awesome. I've had that happen too, where I've had someone be like, "Hey, this dude is trouble. Look out for this guy," and then end up being like one of the best scouts I ever worked with. So yeah, that's pretty good, I guess. Keeping that communication open and understanding it is a small community. So if you mess up, it's probably going to get known by other people. So going back into cyber now, without going into like classified realm, can you tell us how is the shift in the military look going from like traditional armed forces work to starting to implement more kind of cyber focused technologies and TTPs into, the equation?
Yeah, well, one, I consider myself very fortunate for the opportunity I had. So I'll just give a preview of that. And this is all unclassified. Justin, I've talked about this a lot, and I've written about it. I've been on podcasts, so you won't have to, like we talked about before, go back, delete, and cut out everything Russell said. So everything I'm about to say is unclassified. But let me describe just very briefly what my opportunities were post school when I went to U.S. Cyber Command. So I show up and I'm a battle captain on the JOC floor, Joint Operations Center for U.S. Cyber Command. So I was running the daily fight for 12 hours at a time for U.S. Cyber Command. Probably the most impactful, moment for me was election night 2016. I was on duty election night. Do you want to venture a guess what the nation's premier cyber concern was on election night of 2016?
Some hacking going on, or what?
Well, yeah, defend the elections, right?
Oh yeah.
Russian interference in elections, defend, against whatever particularly Russia might do. And boy, we could have a conversation about that, because they weren't hacking our election boxes; they were hacking our brains.
For sure.
Or trying to anyway. But yeah, I was actually on watch. They brought me in as an extra battle captain because that was the first night of Operation Glowing Symphony, which was the nation's largest offensive cyberspace operations against ISIS at the time. And that's, again, all in the public sphere. Your folks can Google NPR, Dina Temple-Raston, Operation Glowing Symphony, how the U.S. hacked ISIS. But I was on watch that night to watch all the takedowns in cyberspace. And again, you can JDAM something, you can get into it and shut it down and not make it work. And this was an operation to basically take down all the media stuff they were doing. If you remember those days, right? They're putting out some pretty crazy beheading videos. And,
wild videos. Highly produced.
Yeah. Very, very, very well produced until you start taking out their media people. Again, there's a whole symbiosis of I'm in the cyber domain and I see something and I can tip that to a kinetic asset that takes some action on and back and forth. That's when you hear in the news today, multi-domain operations, that's where the U.S. is trying to posture itself for. And so I got to see that firsthand, how you do kind of both physical domains, cyber domains, you bring that all together, and that's really multi-domain operations. That's the ability to maneuver in multi-domains. A maneuver isn't movement, it is achieving an advantage over an adversary positionally, temporally, spatially, cognitively. That's maneuver, and using every domain possible to do that is a strategic advantage the United States has. So there I was at the center of that, just what a wonderful opportunity. So then, second year, U.S. Cyber Command, I go to the J38, which is the Fires and Effects Division of U.S. Cyber Command. That is the division responsible for all offensive cyberspace operations for U.S. Cyber Command. Yeah, I learned some things there about what capabilities really mean in that domain, how to weaponeer them, what it takes to weaponeer them, the skill sets required, the cyber approach to things. I learned a ton there. For sure. And then by design, the whole idea, and I credit Lieutenant General Glavy, he is the current Deputy Commandant for Information for the Marine Corps. He was a 1-star at Cyber Command at the time, who told me when I went to that school, he said, Russell, you're coming here. You're going to come here after school, and then we're going to send you back to the Marine Corps with what you learned. And so I got selected for Colonel that second year in Cyber Command. I walked right across the street to Marine Forces Cyberspace Command to give back to the Marine Corps. And for 2 years, I was the J5 for Joint Task Force Ares, which was the counter ISIS Joint Task Force in cyber, and wrote the campaign plans for how to persistently engage. Okay, we're beating ISIS down, we're kicking them out of Iraq, boom, boom, boom. How do you keep them down? Yeah. And how do you use cyber to do that from a persistent, just approach? And I will just tell you, again, staying out of the classified realms, the approach, let's go back to allies and partners. There were others with us in that space, and maybe I couldn't get to them, but maybe they could. And maybe they could get to them in a place around the world where I couldn't, but I was working both ends of the ISIS network collectively. And Justin, injecting friction into the system, make something not work well. They get pissed off. Put some, crap information in there. Now, an organization that's already suspicious of each other and thinks they're stealing from each other, I'm putting information in there, maybe indicating it's true. And you just watch the fighting go. It's like, oh yeah, why would I not want that capability in my kit bag? So that's the approach. That's the opportunity I got in cyber. And so translate that, into your question about, are we doing more and more of that? And the answer is yes. I want to leverage every domain possible. I want to leverage every capability possible to inject friction in the adversary system and make it not work well. And I would just say for the listeners here, the things that I learned as an artillery officer applied very well in that domain. Joint targeting cycle, understanding the target, developing options for the commander selecting, and then applying it. That works. Mm-hmm. And it's a little bit different. You have to have your expertise. We did talk about that, about occupational specialties and the like. I wasn't able to brief the commander USCYBERCOM very technically on what it was going to take to do that thing. But hey, Gunny, come on, you're coming to the brief.
Yeah.
You know how this stuff works. You know how the internet really works. So you put the Gunny out there. But again, like, what did I learn growing up? Lance Corporal Bolanos can brief the Army Fire Support Coordinator, and Gunny so-and-so can brief the commander USCYBERCOM because they're brilliant and they know what they're talking about. So,
were you surprised by capabilities when you got there? Were you like, whoa, we can do this, or is it, I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's taking a step into a completely different environment. So I'm sure for me, if I walked into something like that, I'd be like, holy crap, like that's crazy that this is even possible.
I think my school benefited. I got to think about that for a year and understand the domain a little bit before I got there. So I wasn't necessarily surprised by anything was there. I still had to rely on some technical experts to explain it to me sometimes. IP addresses and domain names and servers and all that. And like, draw that, like, little pictures help. Like I had I tell a lot of people, I had a rolling whiteboard inside the Joint Operations Center floor. Like I could move it around on wheels. So I'd roll it over the defensive cyber desk and go, hey, draw this out for me. Cyber attack from here, there, network, like who owns that? And when you look at it, it does dawn on you, Justin, that like where you and I, we grew up and we look at a map, right, of, contour lines and everything. You go, oh, key terrain, avenue of approach. Cyber officers and Marines, they know how to do the same thing with a network map. They look at like a network map, they go, that's a key piece of that network. Oh, here's where they might come from. And so for me, it was a bit of just, I needed it translated to me. And then I was like, oh, yeah, that kind of makes sense. And I think that's really what our cyber officers and Marines do. Back to how do we leverage the domain for the Fleet Marine Force is we probably need some of those cyber guys and gals to just translate for the fleet commanders, the Marines on the ground. Like, hey, here's what you're looking to do. Here's what it means. I think that's the value of our cyber Marines right now. It's just being translators.
Yeah.
For us ground pounders.
Yeah. When on my way out of the Marines, it was becoming more of a thing where they were having, it was like a division, or I think it was a 1st Marine Division order, like field ops, no cell phones or anything like that. They really wanted to practice the electronic, lowest electronic signature possible. How do we defend against the same kind of capabilities? Do you believe other nations have any kind of capabilities similar to what we have? And how do we defend against that?
Like we do with anything, I'm not avoiding your question. I will answer, but training, hard, realistic training on the threat and what it entails. And what I would say is I'd recommend to all of your listeners and you yourself, Justin, if you haven't seen The Social Dilemma, the Netflix documentary on basically the social media companies and the fact that the algorithms are already designed inherently to addict you and influence your behavior. They want you to keep watching. They want you to click everything possible. And so we have a generation that's accustomed to following the algorithm. Now our adversaries are trying to use that algorithm and influence to do something very specific. And you get back to what was the real issue in the 2016 elections. It wasn't necessarily Russians hacking into our election boxes. It was doing those type of things. You read some of the, unclassed reports out there of them just through Facebook, social media, trying to start a protest in Minnesota on name your political issue.
Yeah.
The Russians don't care. A gender divide, a racial divide, a political divide. They don't care. They're just going to poke both ends and watch the infighting. Remember what I talked about? My ISIS experience?
Yeah, just inject some friction.
Internal friction. That's what the Russian attempt was and probably still is in some degree, although they're pretty busy right now nowadays.
Yeah, for sure.
With something else going on. But anyway, so how do we train our Marines to be suspicious of those type of things? Oh man, like I said, everything I learned in my career translated. Tactical patience, remember that? Mm-hmm. Like, you don't have to pull the trigger right away. Like, take a look. Like, don't click on that link right away. I get quite a few LinkedIn, Instagram. Oh, she's incredibly attractive and she wants to friend me. Now, wait a minute.
Yeah.
50-year-old Brian Russell just doesn't have the game he used to, perhaps. And again, I married my high school sweetheart, so I probably never had game except with one particular lady.
Whatever works, right?
Yeah, that's right. But that's like maybe I shouldn't click on that invite, so to speak. That's probably someone else that doesn't look like her trying to get me. So I think it's training
Yeah.
our Marines for that type of reality environment, and we probably have some work to do there as a Marine Corps. This I call it the robust information environments to train in. The middle of the desert, Twin Palms, is not the most robust information environment you could create for our Marines to operate in. And I don't think the once a year click through as quick as you can cyber awareness training.
Yeah, you got to learn about the purple dragon real quick.
Is getting after it. Yeah, there's probably some different techniques to apply. But if anyone would want to, I recommend this one too. Google Rob Joyce, San Francisco, 2016. And he gives a public talk. Rob Joyce at the time was the director of tailored access operations for the National Security Agency, basically NSA's hacker squad.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically gave a public talk. This is amazing. Like, here's how we do our job. I'm like, oh, I got to listen to this. Like, he's going to spill all the goods. He's like, it's 2 steps. It's really, really easy. We study your network and know it better than you do. Like, really, we know the ins and outs. We know kind of your pattern of life. We're just studying and know that network better than you do. So from a defensive perspective, Justin, all our security administrators, comm guys, IT, do you really know your network? And do you know what looks different on that network? Because if something different happens to that network, you better go look, because that's probably the hack coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So do you really understand kind of how your network normally operates? And again, I come back to things that I was trained on. Combat Hunter, do you ever go through the Combat Hunter program? Yeah. What would Combat Hunter train you? Based on your environment, to detect the anomaly, and then you have a decision. Go investigate, prosecute, whatever on the anomaly. Cyber defense is the same darn thing. So he said, hey, we're just going to study your network, know it better than you, and I'll be able to kind of operate kind of like I look like I belong there. And then step 2 is just I wait. I wait for you to make a mistake. I wait for you to not update your password. I wait for you not to apply the security patch. I wait for you to maybe click the link I sent you. And then I'm in. So that's when you hear advanced persistent threat in this whole cybersecurity context. That's what an advanced persistent threat is, and that's who's coming after us and our Marines. Yeah. And so important. So tactical patience, know your environment. It's all just normal stuff, just applied to the cyber domain, not your kind of normal physical domain. Yeah. Same thing you tell watch. Same thing you tell duty. Why do we tell them to walk around? See what looks abnormal and go investigate it. Why is that guy in the parking lot all night? Like, go ask. That's anomalous behavior.
Yeah, 100%. No, I agree. I think you're right. That is weird. I've never really thought about, like, in something like that, you do have to be pretty aware of what's on your network, because if you don't understand, like, how a network, the architecture of the network and the things that are in it, yeah, I could see how someone could easily slip something in there without you noticing that. In a job field like that, or in a command like that, which is very technical, you've mentioned that multiple times, how technical it is. Do you see a larger reliance on like civilian contractors and stuff to do some of the work because of their expertise? Or do we have a pretty good program in the military that are bringing guys up and training them to tackle these different tasks?
I think there is a continuing need for contract support for this domain, so to speak. And I think from a particular aspect of they will bring current industry perspective into it, maybe the latest in some tradecraft and the like, that our Marines can then learn and benefit from and take with them. That's the thing with anything, though. Training and education for our Marines, how do you keep them current? I'd say cyber or technology is such a fast evolving field that's challenging us right now for how you keep Marines current with that. And so contract support coming in to keep you fresh and up to date with everything, I think, is a viable mechanism. I'm not sure I want to touch the entire topic of bringing in a civilian and making him or her a Marine without going through boot camp and okay, so but well, heck, I'll touch it. What the heck, that will be a challenge for the Marine Corps, because the thing that makes Marine Corps, the Marine Corps and Marines distinct and appreciated, particularly in a joint context, is their Marineness, is their culture of this ability to just, like we said, solve problems. Just what imbibes that spirit to just be a aggressive problem solver. And really creative, and have the confidence to solve that mission, him or herself. I mean, that comes from our training and our background and culture. I think, again, we're hackers by nature. We have this attitude. It's the Chesty Puller story, right? Surrounded by 8 Chinese divisions, chosen reservoir, and he goes, "Great, that simplifies the problem." There's just that attitude that like this is not going to phase me. And so over the course of my career, 2 kind of off the beaten path assignments, 3 years at MARSOC as a staff officer there, Marine Special Operations teams were crushing it, because they brought that Marine spirit to whatever that mission was, and combatant commanders started requesting Marine teams all the time. Mm-hmm. Same thing in cyber. Marine teams are crushing it there. They're aggressive. We have like a combined arms approach to thing. I'll take whatever capability I can steal, put it in my mission, and use it. It all comes out of MCDP1 warfighting. Bias for action, focus on the adversary, combined arms, task organized for the mission. So bringing someone straight into the fold like that, not having part of that culture, isn't going to be immediately successful. You got to think that through anyway, of how that's going to happen.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And that's interesting you brought that up. I've asked this of multiple people that have come on the show. In a day and age where information is easily accessible. Before, you have to go to college, get out of your hometown, go learn something different because, whatever. Now we live in a world of YouTube. You got the internet out there with all kinds of information on it and stuff like that. Do you think it still makes sense to require officers have a 4-year college degree to qualify to become an officer? Or do you think that some of these people that are specialists within their field could potentially, they should be able to qualify based off their experience? Obviously still have to go to OCS, obviously still have to go to TBS, but do we really need a 4-year degree in, a liberal arts degree and something to make a good Marine officer?
So it's a great question. I don't know if I'll give you a satisfying answer per se, but here's my thoughts on it. You really got to back up and go, why officers? you really have, right? And why does the Marine Corps not require a specific 4-year degree?
Yeah.
Right. So what I think my answer to that question, and this isn't, Marine Corps policy, but just having thought through it and gone through the process myself, why officers? Because we are the ones authorized to issue the order to inflict violence. That's why officers exist. That's why the orders come, right? For any, Marine or officer underneath that officer in charge and command authority to inflict violence on behalf of our nation. And so you probably want someone in that position with critical thinking skills, good discernment, good judgment. And it's really the 4-year degree is the best representation of the thing that can help you with that type of mentality and education. For discernment, critical thinking, and judgment is the requirement. And so we could argue, Justin, whether our 4-year degree programs and institutions are doing that for all. But I think that's the basic reason. The other tension in there is this balance of more technical and what do I really need to be a proficient leader in a very technical space. Again, I think it's discernment, judgment, those things, and maybe just a dose of humility. Because like I said, it's like I got General Heritage. He's the current CG of Mar4 Cyber. He was my 1-star boss when I was the J38 there at Cyber Command. And I felt, because I was in charge and he was asking for a brief on the capabilities being employed, whatever operation was, that I would go into his office and I would explain it. And I would get, 2 minutes in the explanation, and he would very quickly realize, Justin, that I didn't know what I was talking about. He'd go, "Hey, go get Major so-and-so up here. Go get guy so-and-so up here."
Yeah.
And just explain it to me. And right. So we're culturally attuned that way. Like, the guy in charge explains to the next guy in charge, or that. It's a little bit different in a technical field like that, where you need some expertise to know what you're talking about, type of thing. So I think that's the tension, is how much of a technical training education do you need, vice that discernment, judgment, liberal arts, if you call it, just how to think critically. Yeah.
It's just it's an interesting topic. I like to talk through with different people to get their perspectives, because it's like, I've used this example multiple times too. Like, if a guy goes through, let's say a guy goes into construction, and then he works through construction for 4 years and goes from being a what's it called? Geez, I don't remember. Goes from being like the new guy to becoming a journeyman, getting his journeyman card, becoming like within a union, a guy that's been tested. He's been whatever. I feel like that should weigh some, that should have some weight when it comes to like making a decision for a guy. Or, another thing, that's not a very good example. Another thing that was brought up the other day, I was on Reddit and someone asked on there, if you were commandant for the day, what is a decision that you would make, or what is a change that you would make? And one thing I wrote down, I was like, allow enlisted personnel to apply to become an officer after 4 years. And I know we have the MECEP program, but within the MECEP program, you lose a guy while he goes and finishes college. Depending on how much college he already has done, you may lose a guy for 2 or 3 years. And in that time frame, I know a lot of MECEP guys that decide they don't want to come back to the fleet, and they're getting medical retirements and stuff out of that. I don't see why we couldn't take like, a guy or gal, that's like 5 or 6 years in, has experience within a field. They show the officers that are above them, see that they have the potential to be a good officer, and recommend them to go do that, but without going through college. I would rather you go through OCS, TBS, and then your MOS school and get right back out and keep doing the job you were doing and keep excelling at it than go and read about, whatever. I guess I'm biased because I was an enlisted guy, but I just don't see the need for the 4-year degree at the end of the day.
So I see a world where what you just described are things we do in combat. It's called battlefield commission.
Exactly. Yeah.
Potential in Staff Sergeant so-and-so or whoever, and go, guess what? Put some bars on and you're off and running. And we very much could be in a day and age where you could see some applicability of that for sure. I would put that in even broader context, and law applies here, right? So this is going to be a bit of a fight for the Marine Corps as it considers talent management, but just greater authority to promote writ large. We are still in that, kind of segmented up or out system. Like, you get considered for promotion when your time comes due. Mm-hmm. Well, this, you had hard charges working for you, that guy could be a corporal today. Like, give someone the authority inside that command to say, guess what? Congratulations, corporal, get you over to corporal's course and go, just like you're saying.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's a broader thing the military needs to take a look at, because again, it gets back to that retention. Some people they look at their, counterparts on the outside of the world and go, man, that guy's just climbing, he's providing value and he's getting recognized for it. And he's just climbing. We're here like 2 more years till I get considered for major. So,
yeah. I just see, I think it's a good, I don't know. To me, it's like that seems like another tool that would also help retention. If I knew that, hey, I can do 4, because a lot of guys will join the Marine Corps going, I'm going to do 1 enlistment and then I want to go become an officer. A lot of guys have this, like, I want to be a Mustang officer. I want to do an enlisted time first so I know what it's like to be led, and then go be an officer. A good majority of those guys never go on to become an officer. They just stay in the enlisted ranks, which is totally fine. But it seems like a really good, like, I don't know, an easy pipeline to fill some of these probably missing billet positions that, just like the enlisted side, the officer side, they got to fill spots too. I don't know. I'm always thinking about like different ways that could be done better. And I just don't see the reason for a degree. I could see arguments for specific classes. Like, hey, we need someone to come in that can be able to write reports and do different things. So they have to have like, a couple of the English courses taken out or something like that. I just feel like it's a waste of time, to require someone to do that 4-year degree. So I just didn't know what your thoughts on that were.
Yeah, I think it's that. It's that critical discernment, judgment. But like, to your point, if you can find that and identify it in someone, it may not be a hard and fast requirement.
Yeah.
Just maybe the model would be to finish said education at a period of time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, something like that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like, you mentioned, like you said, it's not like it's never been done before. This was definitely a thing. Guys would go into World War II, obviously because of attrition. Part of it's guys getting killed, people getting killed and stuff, but it's not unheard of. And a lot of those enlisted guys that were promoted up to officer ranks because they showed leadership ability and stuff like that excelled in those positions. So it's not like it hasn't been tried and tested a little bit. I just think, in this day and age of information, colleges aren't the only place that we can get information, and like having your JAG contract or your flight contract. I think some of these other job fields, you could probably get a specific contract or a contract for that specific field filled by people within that industry out in the real world if they knew that's what they were going to come into. you tell a guy that's been working at some company for 4 years or whatever, or, you know, has a little bit of experience within that field, that, hey, we'll take you as a Marine officer, but you may not get to do what you want to do. You may have to go do, you know, maybe you were a construction, you know, project management guy in construction, and you want to be an engineer, and they send you to go be a, you know, commo, you know, like, why would I leave a job that I like to go take that risk of going into a job I don't like? So yeah, sure. Just some considerations there. Yeah, when you came up for retirement and stuff, what was like the catalyst? You know, what it feel like to drop papers and be that guy on his way out?
Yeah, that's a great question. Very cliche. They say, you know, when the time is right, and the time was right. It became very clear, and it was three things not even a year ago now. So this is about July, August of last year. The director of the North Carolina Mountain Bike League, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, resigned last summer. And I've been a lifelong mountain biker. I've been associated with this youth development organization for several years at this point. And Kathy and I have just been talking for a while, like, hey, you know, what are we going to do? What do I want to be when I grow up? And the opportunity to serve community a little bit more closely in a sport I love was really attractive. And so put an application in, and boom, got an acceptance letter, and that turned into a pretty awkward conversation with my 3-star the next week. hey, sir, they need someone now, and I'm going to leave pretty darn quick if you let me. So I did. I retired in about 5 months, flash to bang. Justin. So, and we can talk about that too. Some transition lessons learned. Be more than happy to share those. The second was medically non-deployable. Fought the last 2 years in command, trying to figure out why I kept getting blood clots in my lungs, and no one can explain it to this day. Wow. So I'm on blood thinners for the rest of my life just to make sure I don't get a clot in my lung and die. But as you can imagine, being on blood thinners, going down range and getting injured in combat is not a good thing. So, technically not non-deployable, and that's hard being a Marine, not being a non-deployable category. And we can talk this too, transition to VA and all that, but you can better believe I put burn pits on all my paperwork. 3 combat deployments, 3 burn pit exposures. Think that has something to do with it.
For sure.
But anyway, maybe a follow-on conversation. And then third, and perhaps the most important, I should have started with this, is just, it was time for the Russell family to get off the Marine Corps treadmill. Marine Corps is awesome. Great organization. Like we talked about, worked with some fantastic people, did some amazing things in my career. You will never get to do anywhere else, but you run hard. Mm-hmm. Your family runs even harder. Tell a lot of people this. I got training to do what I did. Kathy did not. How to be a Marine Corps spouse and deal with all that. My kids did not get any type of training. It was true on the job training, right? OJT. For sure. For all of them. And I think part of it was, let me talk about the mountain biking league. This is it relates directly. I found this mountain bike sport. National Interscholastic Cycling Association is the national level association. There's 30 state leagues across the nation. In 2018, when I was up at Fort Meade, Maryland decided to start their league. And I had a friend in the community, because I've been mountain biking a long time, just decided to start a team there in our local area around Annapolis. And he asked me if I wanted to help him form that team, because my second son, Ian, was our mountain biker at the time. And Justin, I was like, I get to come ride my mountain bike with my kid by being a coach, and sign me up. Yeah. And so we did that the first season, went to the very first race. It was phenomenal. Better run than some adult races I've been in. And the vibe was just one of support and encouragement for the kids. That is the mountain biking community, in my words anyway. Growing up in it, is just everyone just wants you to have a good ride. Yeah. And that's what they want to do for the kids. And so this whole league is designed to build strong minds, strong bodies, strong character in our youth. We just use a mountain bike in the woods to do it. Mm-hmm. It's pretty confidence building. Get over that hill, go over the obstacles, do a race. That builds some confidence in our kids. And so I was part of that for a couple of years in Maryland, all types of awesome. 2020 was my PCS to Camp Lejeune. Justin, you remember 2020 and what a fun year that was?
Yeah, I was here at SDSU.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So we PCS in the midst of COVID lockdown, and it threw the whole family for a loop in some sense. And what I mean by that is we literally ripped our kids out of Maryland. My oldest son was a senior in high school, no prom for him, no graduation, like no rite of passage for him. My daughter, we had been there 5 years. It was a wonderful opportunity, a year of cyber school, 4 years at Fort Meade. My son, who was a senior, spent all 4 years in high school in one place. Pretty cool in most sense, but for him, just the end of it was like miserable. And my daughter spent 5 years, had great friends, no going away parties, nothing, just ripped them out. And so that was hard on the family coming here. But the one kind of silver lining to it, we fell into one of those mountain bike teams here in Jacksonville, North Carolina. And literally the second day we were here, Justin, we were out in the mountain bike trails.
Oh, awesome.
With some of those families. And it's just an immediate community, some familiarity, just a good supportive environment like I just described. And so our last 2 years, we were just members of that team working, at some races and supporting the league. And again, when the opportunity came up to lead it, I think this is it. And here I am. I'm the director of the North Carolina Interscholastic Cycling League.
That's awesome. Was it when you make that decision, what does it feel? What did it feel like for you to be like, wow, I'm actually done. I'm actually calling it.
It was a bit of a relief, honestly, when you struggle with something. Like I said, Kat and I have been talking about it for a while now, 27 years, right? That's a long time doing anything. Just weren't quite sure what that next thing was going to be. I think to our earlier conversation, the fact that I had something purposeful to go to was very positive. Like it wasn't perhaps as stressful as some. I've got something purposeful to go to that's mission oriented. I've got community here. We decided, what they say in transition, where do you want to be? What do you want to do? Knew both right away. And not that I'm going to devalue the value of transition classes, but I went because I had to. But I went so quick, I sat in that class knowing what I was going to do. Like they're like, hey, you need to develop your resume for that. I'm like, no, I got the job, so to speak. I know where I'm going to be, type of thing. So it wasn't probably as stressful for me as it was for some. I would say what I tell everyone is talk to a lot of people, talk to people that have gone through it. I can certainly send you a couple links for some books. Let's go back to Mike Grice, my longtime mentor and another former first ANGLICO CO. He wrote a book on transition called Orders to Nowhere.
Oh, nice.
It's pretty funny, catchy title, but he writes a whole book with kind of that funny, catchy kind of, here's what I discovered when I transitioned. Who knew? You had to do this kind of. That's a Mike Grice attitude for you. But literally, like in early on in the book, he goes, I just drove around Camp Pendleton to talk to every single person that was involved in transition and ask them, how does this work? So he was informed by that. And I did that same thing, Justin. And I think it really benefited when you establish a relationship with the people who are involved in your process. When things go wrong, and they will, people will forget to submit something, paperwork or whatever like that, and you pick up the phone and call, they remember you cared about them, and they'll move some things through for you. And that's even the people at the SIF. Like I drove there, like, here's my list, like, make sure, does anything change, type of thing. And so it's your transition. We are doing a much better job of the Marine Corps of transition for service members. It's good, but it's still a big machine and process. It's not individually tailored for your case. So you have to own a little bit of that and make sure that system is working for you, is the advice I give. So talk to people who've gone through it, invest in it, own it. And like I've said, I did it in a flash to bang of 5 months and came out okay.
Talking to people is huge, because I always tell guys, I'm like, when you're sitting around the command asking questions about, getting out and stuff, you're talking to a bunch of people that have never gotten out. You're asking everyone around you is still there. You can talk to your sergeant major all day about it, but he's never actually transitioned out yet. So it's like, get in touch with maybe one of your buddies that got out a year earlier or something like that and get some advice. I was at the MEU on a down cycle. We had just got back from deployment. So I had the opportunity. I took advantage and went to all the transition classes. I did the required ones, and then they had like specific ones for different, like if you're going to go be an entrepreneur, if you're going to be a college student. I was like, I don't really know yet. So I'm going to go to all of these, and obviously I had the ability to do that because we were on a down cycle. There wasn't a lot going on and stuff. So not everybody has that opportunity. But another thing I tell people, as they're getting out, is this is a unique opportunity to go do something that you always ever wanted to do. Not for everybody. Obviously, some people have a lot of commitments, family commitments, financial commitments, and stuff like that. So they got to roll into like a pretty solid career immediately. But if you're not kind of tied down by some of these commitments, this is a time where you can go, you know what? I always wanted to be a camera guy for a motion picture company. You know what I'm saying? So why not go try it? Use the GI Bill to go try that. Hey, I always wanted to be maybe a private pilot. Use your GI Bill and go to school for that. It's like, I tell guys, don't get wrapped into the mindset of a lot of people that you have to get out and go work at some corporation and, oh, they're looking for leadership, that military mindset leadership at this place. You don't have to fall back into whatever rhythm that you think that you're supposed to. If it's something interesting or unique out there, take advantage. Take advantage of your GI Bill. Even if you don't want to go to a 4-year university, you want to learn a technical skill, the GI Bill will pay for it, and they will pay you at the same time, which gives you that opportunity to try something new. Without the GI Bill and stuff, I wouldn't have been able to do the podcast and everything like that. I was in college. I go, you know what? This is 3 years that I'm going to be in school. This is a time to start a website, start this podcast, and let it grow, like be a little experiment and kind of, do it through while I'm in school and getting paid to go to school. And then hopefully by the time I finish school, it'll be a self-sustaining kind of deal. And it somewhat was at first, and it's getting better and stuff as I learn more and do more, and then also do more like digital marketing, which is my other like main gig. But it's you got to see it as an opportunity to go be whatever it is you wanted to be when you grow up. Besides being a Marine.
Yep. Yeah, that's good advice. And as early as you can think about it, the better as well from transition. And like I said, I think we've done a decent job of that in the Marine Corps of helping particularly young Marines think about it. At some point you're going to transition. So laying a little bit of foundation now to do that is important. And then like you said, consider your options. Have the flexibility to go try some different things out. A lot of my peers that have gone through the transition, the thing they landed on immediately is not still the thing they're in now.
Yeah.
They're working around. The corporate world is that way for those considering, corporate experience. That can be pretty cutthroat too. Like I told you, the Russ family was on the treadmill. We had to get off. So I didn't want to step just onto another treadmill.
Yeah.
Wearing just a different type of uniform. Enjoy the flexibility of one, just working with kids in a youth sports organization, and the flexibility working from home and traveling to great trails across North Carolina and spend the weekend, which is a ton of great folks from across the whole state together. It's really good.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really awesome. Well, Brian, I really appreciate it. We'll go ahead and wrap it up. Where can people go if they want to get into mountain biking? What do they have to look up for that?
Well, certainly I'd love everyone to come to North Carolina and check us out. But again, the National Association is National Interscholastic Cycling Association, 30 state leagues. So good chance there's something going on in your state, wherever you happen to be. So Google NICA or NorthCarolinaMTB.org if you want to come check us out. You can find my contact information on there. Drop me a line. I'm happy to get you connected to anyone in the mountain bike community. Again, it's done a world of good for my family. The hashtag Nike uses more kids on bikes. That's our strategic goal. Lifelong mountain bikers, outdoor enthusiasts, but really I think it's about more families on bikes. This is a sport where you're literally on the field with your kid, practicing together. And a sport like this, there's no cuts. There's no bench. Just come on out with your bike and we'll train you to ride it, and maybe do a race, but you don't have to if you don't want to. It's more about hanging out with some great people and enjoying the outdoors. And I think we've all used a little more of that nowadays.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
A little more community, a little more connection, and getting off our devices we talked about.
Oh man,
has some risk to them.
Yeah, community is important. And it sounds like, you're doing something that's fulfilling, and something that's like, you feel like you're giving back, teaching, the youth and stuff like that. And I think that's awesome stuff. I really appreciate you coming on. Everybody can check out my stuff at Former Action Guys, Former Action News on Instagram. My website's jkramergraphics.com. Hit me up if you're looking for digital marketing, SEO, Google ranking improvement, stuff like that. I am available. And that's it. Thanks again, man.